Hey guys, and welcome to our new tips and tricks video, Bicycle Touring the Balkans. We have spent the past 3 months and over 3,000 kilometers cycling all the way from Austria to Greece, and on the way we've picked up a few little tricks that we thought might be interesting for you. While some of these are more general, others are very specific to the region, and we think that all of them are pretty interesting, so here we go. Tip number 1, wildcamping. On our journey so far, we've cycled through Austria, Germany, Slovenia, Croatia, Montenegro, Albania and Greece. And so far, we've never had a problem in any of these countries finding a spot to wildcamp. Either towards the evening, we have a look if we can find a spot just off the side of the road or on a field or something like that, or if it's proving to be difficult, we've also asked farmers in the past if we can just sleep on their field, and most of the time it's been no problem at all. 2 things which might be interesting in general. In Austria, even though generally you might think it's forbidden to wildcamp, it actually depends on the region. In Styria, for example, where we cycled through a lot of the time, there isn't actually a regulation that governs wildcamping, so technically you can always argue that it's okay that you spent the night there. And in general, even though it's forbidden in most of the countries we cycled through in the Balkans, it's if you stay one night, and especially if nobody sees you and you don't leave any trash, I think you can always argue your way out of it. And of course, just respect the locals, respect the police if you do run into them. Yeah. The other thing to note, in Albania, even though wildcamping is technically completely legal in Albania, and online you might read that it's a wildcamping paradise, we didn't exactly experience this the way we expected, because even though you're allowed to wildcamp on the beaches and so on, in the north especially it was super touristy. There was so much trash everywhere that it was really not, we didn't want to sleep next to a pile of trash in our tent. Maybe if you're in a camper it's different because you can block out the trash for the other people more, but we really didn't like that, so we decided to head inland a bit more, away from the touristy places, and then it was fine to find a place to sleep.
Tip number 2. We cycled through the Balkans during the summer, and of course it got really hot, sometimes even 45 degrees in the shade. So we tried to avoid the midday heat and cycled early in the mornings and then in the evening again, and took a very long lunch break, and we can really recommend that. And of course, that's obvious that it gets very hot during the day, but it's maybe not so obvious that it also can get pretty cold during the night, especially when you're a bit higher up and not right to the coast. So make sure that you have something warmer with you, not only a thin sleeping bag, but even a thicker one or some warmer clothes, so you don't get cold in the night.
Tip number 3. As Luisa mentioned, it gets really hot in the summer in the Balkans, so obviously you need a lot of water. We actually only bought water in one country during our whole trip, and that was in Albania, and only at the beginning, towards the end, we actually also drank the tap water. So our tip is you can actually drink the tap water in all the countries we mentioned before. Even though if you read online it might say definitely don't drink the tap water in any of these countries, especially Montenegro, Albania or so on, but it's really no problem. You can always get a refill at a cafe. Everyone is super generous and super friendly. The only place we were really told also by locals to avoid drinking the tap water is around the Tirana region in Albania. And actually we also heard from our couchsurfing host in Montenegro that the Montenegrins are actually really proud of their tap water, so it's actually nice to drink the tap water there.
Tip number 4. Speaking of locals, you should always look for some interaction with them. Either by getting a couchsurfing or warm showers host, or just running into them on the streets or in small cafes in little villages, which we really like to do. Yeah, it's just a really great way to get to know a country and the culture. Actually, the best way you can get to know it better than through a tourist guide.
And the great thing about talking to locals is you get lots of tips that you wouldn't otherwise get. Insider tips, you could say. For example, one of these tips that we got from our warm showers host in Croatia, and actually some other people we ran into on the street as well, is to go island hopping. Our plan initially in Croatia was just to cycle along the coast, which was at parts pretty busy, but still alright. But then we were told to go island hopping, which was absolutely amazing. Especially Korčula was really, really great. It was just a really empty island and the scenery was amazing and we had a great time there. One thing to remember though, in Croatia when you go island hopping, not all the ferries there take bicycles or are extremely expensive. So make sure to check beforehand which routes you want to take. Sometimes, for example, you have to go back to the mainland to take another ferry to another island and can't go directly from one island to the other. So make sure you check this in advance.
Tip number 5. If we were to do this trip again, there would be definitely some areas we would avoid, especially touristy areas like the crowded beaches in Albania and big cities. So our tip for you, if you really want to explore a city, then you should get an accommodation for 1 or 2 nights so you can experience the city without your bike, because there are often in old cities many stairs, or it's very crowded and it's not funny to do that with a big bike. And you can also not leave it anywhere when all your belongings are on the bike.
And last but not least, tip number 6, dealing with wild animals. In the Balkans there are a variety of wild animals, most predominantly wild bears and wolves. But obviously we never had any issue with them, never encountered any, unfortunately, maybe, because it would be cool. But if we did, you would have probably heard about it anyway. But especially in the north of Greece, there are meant to be 500 to 600 wild bears living in a pretty small region, and it's actually not that uncommon to run into them, as 2 of our warm showers hosts actually told us that they had them in their backyard only a few weeks before we got there. And there are also lots of signs along the road warning of wild animals. So if you're wild camping in that region, definitely make sure to follow proper bear protocol. You can read up on that online. It's quite complex, what all the things you should keep in mind, but it's definitely worth it if you're in a bear region. Actually, the animals we had the most problems with are dogs. Not only shepherd dogs up in the mountains, for example, in remote areas, but also dogs protecting industrial areas, which are very, very aggressive. There are a number of ways that we deal with dogs. For example, if the dogs are still ahead of us and we have time to react and we can see that these dogs might become aggressive, we usually slow down, sometimes even get off our bicycles and push, making sure that the bicycle is between us and the dogs, and then just see if they calm down and if they keep their distance. Worst case, also get our hiking sticks and kind of wave it at them so they get scared and back off, and then when we're far enough ahead of them, get back on our bikes and cycle. Obviously this doesn't always work, because most of the time actually we are startled by the dogs because they come shooting out of some area, industrial area. And then the best thing to do is in the moment, in the impulse when they run up to you, scream back at them really loud, bark at them, whatever. Make sure you also sound very aggressive. That also usually already throws them off, which is enough for you to keep cycling. If that doesn't work, this is actually our best tip. Get your water bottle, which we have right on at the front of our handlebars, with the top always open, and then just squirt water at them, because dogs definitely don't like water being squirted at them, and that's usually enough to get them to back off. In general, also, of course, don't make eye contact. Don't try to run away if you're already pretty close to the dogs, because that, especially if you're in a camp, like already set up your camp, for example, that'll usually just intimidate them more to run after you and bite you. But yeah, there's no 100% perfect way to deal with dogs, but those are our tips that we have for you at the moment.
So those are the tips we collected during the last 3 months. We hope you could take some advice from them, and if you have any opinion about those topics, just comment down below. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.